What do you do when the definition for masculinity you've been taught and used your whole life no longer works for you? When your idea of manhood leaves you disappointed and empty, where do you go? Well, why is it that men have such a hard time building relationships with other men? In this episode, I have the privilege of talking with Sean Galla, the founder of mensgroup.com, a site that offers many online groups for men to be able to connect with other men for encouragement, discussion, and training. You'll hear how Sean's definition of masculinity left him with a crisis and how he had to dig deeper to find a more meaningful definition. You're listening to the Man They Remember podcast, where we're encouraging men to be the kind of man people will remember when we're gone. We're tearing down the macho man stereotype one episode at a time. Go to mantheyremember.com for more information. All right, well, welcome into another episode of the Man They Remember podcast, encouraging men to be the kind of man people will remember when you're gone. We're tearing down the macho man stereotype one episode at a time, and really seeking to help redefine masculinity around character as opposed to hobbies. Nothing wrong with all those hobbies. If you like working on your car, like hunting, all those things that a lot of guys love to do, that's awesome. We support that. We encourage that. But you don't have to be into those to be a man. So that's what we're really trying to hone in here on the Man They Remember podcast. Today, I've got a real privilege for you. This is Sean Galla, who's going to be joining us for this episode of the podcast. He's the founder of Men's Group, mensgroup.com, and then they even have a free group that I've been a part of on Facebook. But Sean, welcome to the podcast. Oh, I lost your audio there.
Whoops, I was muted. Yeah, you're really happy to be here, David. I'm excited with what you're doing. I love the how you're presenting it, and yeah, I love the concept of the man they'll remember. And I saw that you're up to episode 97 on your website, so I hope I'm lucky number 100 or something like that. Once it's all said and done, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, we're not quite that far, but yeah, I won't hold you off till 100, but
yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. So, yeah. Sean, can you just tell us really quickly, just kind of pitch the idea of Men's Group, and then we'll come back to that later on in the podcast. But to just kind of help set the context for why we're talking, how this conversation even got started today. Yeah,
definitely. Well, this conversation got started because I think that men need places to talk about this kind of stuff, and
right.
And I saw you doing that, and so I really wanted to reach out and to be a part of it because I love what you're doing. But on as far as mensgroup.com, yeah, I never wanted to get into men's groups. I never saw myself getting into that as a career. But 12 years ago, I happened to invite a bunch of friends down to a surf trip in Mexico. And after the surf trip, we sat around in a circle. I thought we'd talk about business, and the first guy says, "My wife's had 3 miscarriages and I have no idea how to support her." And what I noticed is that the guys are very receptive and supportive of that conversation. And then the next guy asked a personal question. And I was like, wow. And so when I talked to the guys later and I asked them, why did you get into that stuff on this trip? They said, because I haven't been able to talk about it with anybody.
Wow.
And these are successful guys. These are popular guys. These are guys in industries that we look up to. Some of those guys went on to start some of the biggest podcasts or write some of those popular books that we've seen. Some of them have became TV celebrities and stuff, athletes. And it's like, they still don't have anybody to talk to about nuts and bolts, everyday guy stuff, relationship conflicts and
right.
Those kinds of things. So yeah, we started mensgroup.com. We just create online discussions and video men's groups so that guys can talk about whatever's on their mind.
Yeah, that's great. So we're definitely going to circle back to that because I think it's really great and really important. But one of the things that I heard you talk about on another podcast is this idea of redefining masculinity. And I know it's hard. Masculinity is it's a hard thing to put a definition to.
Yes.
because so many people will have a different idea. Like, you talk to probably 100 different men, every man's probably got a different definition.
Mhm.
But when you're thinking masculinity, how would you start to redefine it?
Yeah. How would I start to redefine it? How would I like to see it redefined?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess just to get to that point, I have to share the background on where I got my concept of masculinity from. It was just from sports. I grew up as a hockey player, and I had a dad who was like a very wholesome, providing, loving guy, but he was also kind of emotionally numbed out. And so my definition of masculinity growing up was like, be tough, classic definition, be tough, don't talk about your feelings, all that stuff.
Right.
Be a man. Be a man.
Yeah. Real men don't cry.
Yeah, real men don't cry. Yeah. And
Right.
and unfortunately, that's a recipe that led me into all sorts of issues, created a lot of suffering for myself, led to me getting sick because I was bottling up so many feelings and stuff like that. And just blowing out into a lot of bad behaviors that I wasn't proud of as well. And so I had to, when I got sick, I actually had to face like, who am I without all those things, without the sports and whatever. And what I realized is that what's cool and the most masculine thing that I could come across, besides just like having a hairy face and broad shoulders and a deep voice and I can hit things in sports, like, okay, that's those are characteristics of a man for sure. I like playing that role, I like being the man in my relationship with my girlfriend. She likes being the woman. But in general, what it comes down to this like real masculinity is this emotional unfazability. It's being solid, for those around you. And to do that, you have to be solid with yourself.
Right. And
so for me, the masculine journey is really this inner journey of coming to terms with these feelings we're walking around with, that we've trapped even since childhood, and like getting okay with those so that we're not walking through the world getting triggered and blowing out into immature behaviors and all these kinds of things. Right.
Yeah. Do you mind diving into that just a little bit more? You talked about sickness, and so how were you getting sick as a result of kind of being emotionally bottled up?
Yeah, good question. So I didn't know it at the time, but I was going through a breakup, end of an important relationship, and instead of feeling into that or the stuff I had from my childhood and my relationship with my father, difficult relationship, I was on a ski trip at high altitude and I just couldn't get out of bed and couldn't figure out what was wrong for about 9 months. Finally found a specialist who did the right tests and figured out that I had basically mold poisoning and Lyme disease. So at some point I had been bit by a tick.
Right.
And those are both, mold and Lyme are both opportunistic little creatures that basically wait until your, immune system's low and then they bloom, And so what happened is it took me from there like 3 years of just like basically being bedridden, and two years of being bedridden, and then another couple of years of like clawing my way back. And looking back, I didn't realize it at the time, but the primary reason why why my immune system was weakened was because I was running from myself. I was trying to achieve feeling good about myself through external accomplishments, through business, speaking at conferences, chasing women, instead of just actually acknowledging what was going on. I felt really sad about this breakup, and I felt kind of sad about myself.
Right.
And I think that stress of like fighting against those feelings constantly ended up depleting me and making me feel, eventually leading to me getting sick.
Yeah, that's interesting. We talked actually a little bit about that on the last episode or a couple episodes ago with Michael LaRock.
Great.
And he was saying essentially the same thing, that, big part of his story was, he was just kind of chasing success and whatever. He was in construction, and as long as he was succeeding and working 17 hours a day and getting all the toys he wanted and being able to provide the kind of life he wanted, and basically not having the time in his life to have to even think about who he was or how he felt about himself or any of those things. He was good, but then once that was taken away and he had to start wrestling with it, it hit him really hard for a few years. And I think that's one of the things that I don't know that I'm even really good at. I've tried to get better at it, and just actually working on it recently with, meditation and those kinds of things, and just trying to say, what am I feeling?
Yeah. What's really going on in this meat suit right now?
Right. Yeah. And it sounds so, it just sounds so elementary, right? It just sounds so like something a child, like you would tell a child, who's upset and like, well, how are you feeling right now?
What are you feeling? Yeah.
Right.
But we were never taught that as men,
Right.
So
yeah,
myself included. I grew up in a very loving household, and I still don't have those skills. And so my whole life I've avoided it. And until a couple of years ago, I'm 37 now, I couldn't identify what I was feeling,
Right.
A lot of men think there's only two emotions, happy and angry.
Right.
Which is crazy because emotions are so dynamic and so specific, morose, agitated,
right,
sorrow.
Right.
There's like different elements to it, different flavors. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're there for a reason, right? If we're feeling one of those feelings, it's because there's something that's trying to communicate. Our heart is trying to communicate something to us that we need to address, right?
Yeah.
And we don't like to do that as guys, or at least in large part, a lot of guys up until now, I would say traditionally, we don't like to stop and think about, what's causing that feeling that I'm having a hard time putting a finger on.
Yeah, which is unfortunate because like you said, your feelings are always trying to tell you something. It's just your nervous system being like, hey, there's something you should pay attention to here.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And often I'm uncomfortable about the situation, but more times for me, it's actually, hey, this sort of situation reminds me, being the nervous system, reminds us of something in the past that was similar that we still feel upset about.
Mm-hmm.
An old wound that hasn't closed, Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like I haven't actually read the book. I've just heard a lot of people talk about the book, The Body Keeps the Score. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah, I have it. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you read it?
I have, yeah.
Yeah. So is that what you're talking about? Like, you've got, sometimes you'll have feelings that come up and you don't even know why you're feeling that way, but it's, you're feeling that in your body. Can you get into that a little bit for me to help me understand that?
Yeah, definitely. So The Body Keeps the Score in particular, that book's about, it starts out with how psychologists started observing war vets and how they came down with these different physical illnesses and mental illnesses after being at war. And they were trying to figure out why. And basically they realized what other parts of the scientific community have discovered, which is that the nervous system holds on to emotions, energy. Emotions are just energy in your body, essentially. Like hormones are released to get you to run away from the tiger. That's fear.
Right.
Right. So like there's energy produced in the body. And if that's not expressed in the moment, then the energy kind of gets trapped in the nervous system. And any good massage therapist will tell you that 30-40% of their clients will cry when they get a good massage. Why is that? Well, because you're just releasing tension, right? What is tension? Why do you have a stiff, sore back or stiff neck?
Mm-hmm.
Why does it feel good to rub it out? It's just the fascia in our muscles, all these different parts. They seem to just hold on to this energy. It's one of the defects of the human body,
right?
And so what happens often is then we go through the world and carrying this stuff around. Could be from childhood, could be from growing up playing sports, could be from work, whatever. Could be from recent car crash or something, and then something reminds us of that, and then those emotions come shooting up.
Right.
And we don't know why we're acting so irrationally or why we're having such a disproportionately large reaction. But the body's always keeping score. The body's like, anything that you don't let yourself feel in the moment will get stuck in the nervous system. It sounds bad, but it's also good, because if you let yourself feel that stuff, if you do what you were talking about, going and sitting with your feelings when they pop up, then eventually, that stuff will be released from the pressure cooker you've created, and then, you won't be as triggered in the future.
Right. Yeah. So pressure, slow cooker instead of pressure cooker, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, I don't know if I'll ever get over 100% of my dad being an alcoholic and saying some of the stuff he said to me, but like, the good news is that I've gotten in there. I've cried out a lot of that stuff to the point where now I don't feel as sad about myself as I used to, because his language made me feel kind of sad about myself. And so now I'm not as triggered. Right. And so now I suffer less. I feel lighter. I have more capacity for people in my life. It's like only positives once you get into that stuff.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. So the man, the key man in your life that's supposed to be giving you the picture or the framework or the structure of what masculinity is supposed to be has become the thing that maybe is keeping you or has kept you at times from being able to understand masculinity. Is that accurate?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I didn't really think about masculinity much, but up until recently, but like, I think ultimately what happened is I had a father who loved me very much, but he used a lot of disapproval and shame, probably because that's what his family used.
Right.
And so I went out into the world just feeling not that great about myself. And so then I tried to overcompensate and trying to prove myself through chasing women, through business accomplishments, through lofty, careers that make people go, oh, wow, when they hear about it. But in general, I suffered a lot behind the scenes. I wasn't on my true path and purpose. And ultimately, didn't feel that good about myself as a man. I wasn't solid. Like if somebody said something, I'd get upset or offended.
Right.
If people couldn't count on me because I wasn't always emotionally solid. So yeah, I wasn't in my masculine core,
Yeah, why do we think that's masculine? When somebody says something that hits us the wrong way, and our instinct is to just blow up in response and and defend ourselves or something. Why do we as men see that as being a man?
Do men see it that way?
It seems like a lot of guys, maybe not all guys, but
yeah, I'm not doubting it. I'm just curious to hear your experience with that, because from my experience, my personal experience, when I've blown up like that, and I still do it, of course, I'm still human, I still have just, get triggered occasionally into whatever, but, yeah, whenever I do it, I feel really poor about myself after.
Right.
So I don't think it feels like I'm a man in that moment, or that I'm doing something positive towards my masculinity. I think it's more just like I've bottled up these feelings because that's what I was taught to do. And they just come shooting out in these inappropriate ways at the wrong time. And men tend to do that because we were told not to share our feelings. So it gets I think those reactions get associated with the masculine, but I'd say that is an example of somebody who's not being masculine because he's running from his own feelings, hence why they're bottling them up.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the things we've talked about is being able to control your reactions, your emotions, your responses, and that's often something that comes as you become more mature. When we're more immature, we have a harder time controlling those things. But so you go through life with this picture, and then you get sick for a little while, and then you start having a different understanding of masculinity. How did your definition start to change during that time?
Yeah, it's a good question. Just quickly though, just to touch on that last emotional point, I don't know if it's an image. I would say that on like a life timeline, it feels like it's an immature versus maturity thing. Like as I've gotten older, I've gotten better emotionally. For a lot of men, it's the opposite. As they get older, they seem to be wading in more and more emotional residue or whatever. They like struggle more and more.
Right.
So for me, it's like it just comes down to two kinds of people. There's people that will face that stuff and make progress, or there's people who keep running from it and then develop more and more unhealthy behaviors.
Right.
Yeah. So it's not just something that seems to happen over time. Like guys need to make a conscious choice to, okay, I don't want to be that monster anymore who yells at my kids or like drinks to solve my problems or goes to porn or whatever it might be. I want to I want to be a better man than that.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make that distinction. Sorry.
No, I think that's good. I probably oversimplified it.
It's no, I don't think you did. I just really, I want to drive that point home that like, it's a choice that guys need to make,
Yeah.
So that's just something I like to preach about.
No, that's good. That's good. I'm glad you did.
Yeah. So you're asking like how my definition of masculinity changed, like after I got sick and had to face all that stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. This answer might be a little disappointing for you, David, but like, I don't think about masculinity much, and I still don't, even though I run men's groups. And I think I said that in the other podcast too, you might've listened to. But I can talk about the relationship with myself, and so, which is similar to masculinity, I guess, by other people's definition. So when I got sick, all of a sudden, all those things that I was clinging on to for my identity and for feeling good about myself that were external, like dating the pretty girls, or speaking at conferences, or having these impressive businesses, or traveling around doing these cool sports, because I'd go on surf trips or ski trips for work or whatever. Like when those things faded away, I was left with the real confronting question of, well, who am I without all those things? Because I didn't like myself without all those things for like the first, year. I resisted it quite a bit, and then I just had to face it because I was miserable. I was like, okay, if I'm gonna be sick like this the rest of my life, and I can only just go for a walk around the block, how can I be okay with that? How can I find some joy and meaning in just me being me without all that stuff? I had no friends. I lost my business. I had nothing. I was in my parents' basement at 32, lying in bed most of the day. So like, who am I without all that stuff?
Right.
And the answer was simple. I am my core values and my essence. So like, I'm just a sweet guy. I like having meaningful conversations. I love the ocean. I love animals. I love helping people, especially with emotional, like helping them grow especially men with emotional intelligence and stuff like that, And what ended up happening is, as a result of like ditching the sort of immature identity attachments that I had, and instead having to settle into what I like about myself, I showed up in the world a lot more masculine because I just liked myself.
Right.
And I wasn't trying to get validation anymore from the external world. I was just kind of like content and grounded with who I am and what I'm doing. And like, and what's cool is that if you base your worth and your masculinity or value or whatever in core values, those things don't really change.
Right.
I think those things are going to be with me for the rest of my life. So now masculinity just feels like I'm just way more cool with myself than I was before,
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. You hit on so many important things there. There seem to be themes that come up when we have these conversations. Identity being one of those. Finding our identity in what we do instead of something inside about who we are. And it's one of those things. Once you see it, once you start seeing it, it becomes really easy to spot. And men who are doing that, who are living for ambition or success as their identity, as opposed to some kind of internal core value or internal identity. How have you been able to? And I'm just maybe curious for myself.
Great,
because I'll see guys living like that and kind of moving in a dangerous direction or potentially dangerous direction, but it's really hard to help someone see that when they're wrapped up in it, right? Like, unfortunately, it seems like it has to take a major event like getting sick or getting fired, or a big car accident to get our attention, and then we can start to look at our lives a little bit differently. How have
relationship ending,
right?
That's a big one. Yeah, classic. Yeah.
Have you been able to help guys see that without the big catastrophe to trigger it?
You're not gonna like the answer, but no. That's the answer.
No, you're gonna tell me how to do it, and I was just gonna take it and use it for the rest of my life.
Yeah, exactly. My experience is that I spent the first 30 something years of my life trying to get people around me to become an even better version of themselves. And I've had to come to a place of acceptance that people will only typically do not change, because change is difficult and painful, and they only will do so if they're motivated to,
right?
If they have a big enough reason to. So we have a lot of guys coming to mensgroup.com who haven't gone through some big tragedy like a car crash or somebody dying or something. but they found motivation. You know, they've had their relationship go south. They've had a conflict at work. I don't know, just don't like how they look in the mirror, or they're just not happy with how they're talking with their kids. They feel like a bit of a monster. They want to change it. So they're self-motivated. I've had very little success in my life and in men's groups when people don't volunteer to like go on that journey themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I know is frustrating as a pastor. It's very frustrating for me as a friend and as a family member with some people in my life too.
Yeah, it's just, you know, one of the phrases I say all the time is, I can't want it bad enough for you.
Yeah.
And you'll see these, you know, these issues that guys are facing, and you know, if they could just kind of get this one idea, if they could make this one shift or this one change in their thinking, it would bring peace to so many areas of their lives.
Yeah,
where they're at war. But if they don't want it, there's almost nothing you can do to help them want it.
I have a funny story about this if you'd like to hear it.
Yeah, I'd love to.
I was just chatting with my men's group about this exact subject because in my life, I moved to a surf town maybe like 3 months ago on the west coast of Canada with my girlfriend, and we're both surfing a bunch and we're both learning a bunch. And I've surfed a lot and she's learning. Right. And so I've kind of been expecting her to ask questions and stuff, and she hasn't. And we've been going out surfing, and I've been frustrated by the simple mistakes she's been making because I want to help her. So I go over there and point them out. And of course, classic relationship dynamic, she takes it as criticism. Right. And it's unsolicited advice. So like I'm in the wrong. And I talked to my men's group about it. And my friend Bill said, who's a wise guy, he said, why you're robbing her the gift of learning that stuff herself. And learning that stuff on her own time. If she wants to paddle in circles, I'm sure you do that too. That's you can't change that, right? And I think back to myself growing up. Like I was a professional DJ, and in my early 20s, and like my dad did not want me to do that at all. He thought that was a huge mistake, that it would lead me getting into drugs and all sorts of stuff like that. My family constantly gave me a hard time, thinking there was a mistake. And honestly, looking back, even though it looked really immature, it really defined my social skills, really sharpened them. It really led me to be able to read people, because you're standing up there just reading people all the time. Right. Like it took these counselor skills that I naturally had and like amplify them. It was one of the best things I've ever done. And I got to learn that the kind of life that's projected, the junk food values that are projected by the media about nightclubs and partying and money, they aren't actually that fulfilling. And so what a great lesson that I had to learn on my own. And if my dad had tried to like stomp that out of me, you know, or force me to learn that on his timeline, maybe I wouldn't be the same man. Maybe I wouldn't be doing here. So it's a really difficult thing to accept. But like I've come to, this is just me. I've come to the place where I'm like, I'm going to try to be a shining light example for those people. Hopefully they get inspired to make some change themselves. And I'm going to be there to help the ones who put their hand up. Right. But I'm not going to try to convince people anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. I would have to agree. You know, I've wasted honestly so much time trying to convince people.
Yeah, and energy, just like your own energy, you could be spending on your family or your friends or your own personal growth, and it's like,
over the years I've invested in a lot of guys, and it was only the guys that were hungry. That's one of our virtues for the podcast, is to be hungry.
I'm gonna write that down. I actually like that. That's a good way to summarize people who like want it.
Right.
Yeah.
And we, if before that, I would, I just wanted to develop guys. Like I wanted to mentor them in some way. And so I'd talk to guys and I'd meet with them and, say, hey, would you be interested in kind of building a little bit of a relationship here and seeing if I can kind of coach you and so on and so forth. Yeah. And they would for a little bit, but then they would never stick, or they would never follow through once I started asking something of them, because they weren't the ones that were interested in it. I was.
Totally.
I was interested in helping them grow. They weren't interested in growth.
No.
But then after that, I started looking for guys that were hungry, that wanted some kind of change. And then I didn't care where they were in any kind of spectrum. It's just if I could see some kind of hunger for growth in their life, I would just kind of pounce on them and say, "Hey, let's start getting together. Let's talk a little bit about where you are in life and see if we can't, figure out how to help you get what you want, and those are the guys that stick with it for years and they keep coming back, right?
Totally. Yeah. And I think that's wise because change is really painful and difficult. Mm-hmm. Especially personal change on an emotional level, the bad habits or behavior that we don't like about ourselves, the way we feel about ourselves and the world, the way we communicate with our family members. That's all deep-rooted stuff that we learned when we were children.
Right.
And there's a reason why we shy away from it. It's because the brain, one of its jobs is to keep us away from painful things.
Right.
It's brilliant doing that.
Yeah.
And so, people have to be motivated to make those changes. And if they're not, they never will. Mm-hmm. And the majority of the world never will get into that stuff because it's just life is already hard enough as it is. Why should I dig into that stuff?
Right. Right.
But you find somebody who's like motivated. God, it's so rewarding.
Right. Yeah. And then, some people I kind of give a little bit of a pass. Some of us aren't even in a spot where we have the bandwidth to be able to think about something like that. We're literally surviving, from day to day, and done a little bit of reading on this topic. When you're living below the poverty line and and you're working 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet, and you're not sure if you're going to have a meal for your kids or something like that, all of your energy gets consumed, with just surviving.
Yes.
And the people who need the help the most to get up, out of that above the poverty line are the ones that have the least amount of bandwidth to be able to receive any kind of help like that, because they just have to get through today. They're not really even thinking about tomorrow. It's just, how can I get through today and then wake up tomorrow and get through tomorrow as well.
That's it. Yeah. And that's how we ended up here too, as our fathers. If you look back at the last 100 years, it wasn't until the 1950s that things got kind of comfortable, and we had big TVs and big cushy cars and air-conditioned malls and stuff. It's like before that, it was like post-war, couple wars within, 30 years, like a lot of people migrating to different parts of the world to escape the wars. Like my dad's dad grew up in Ireland working in the coal mines when he was 11, set out for a new life when he was 15 on his own, paid for his own ticket on a steamship to Canada.
Wow.
Moved to Canada alone. Think about where you were at, where you were 15. Were you ready to set out and build your own life?
Yeah. No way.
I was still wearing like Velcro shoes and trying to figure myself out and still living at home, and then he had 11 kids. And so like my dad's not getting any attention from those 11 kids and his dad isn't getting him any love because his dad didn't get any himself, clearly. So then my dad comes along and I'm like, expecting him to be all lovey-dovey and nurturing and be able to talk about his feelings. He didn't have that luxury. His dad didn't have that luxury. His dad's dad. But the interesting thing is that the research shows that humans used to do that. Emotional health was a priority when we were tribal creatures. Right. It's just in the industrial and agricultural revolutions where like the focus was on working. And that's when men started to be led astray, it seems like.
Yeah, it's we got addicted to the drug of success and
progress,
status,
progress, just like building things, making life better in general. Yeah,
I think it was in the 50s too that houses started adding dining rooms or something. I can't remember what the significance of that was, but the conversations in homes changed from being in the kitchen or around the fireplace and telling stories, when you had time to tell stories and pass stories on from generation to generation. And then but because of status, we wanted to have, I can't remember, there's some article I read somewhere about some famous person showed off having just a dining room just in their home specifically for eating meals. And then that became a thing for homes across the country that were being built, and
which is strange, right? Because you should be talking and eating together all day.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting. I never thought about that. Probably that probably came around about the same time as the TV. Right. Which then also killed that evening conversation between families,
Yeah. So instead of family stories or virtues being passed on through story, now it's whatever stories are being told to us through the media.
Yeah, exactly. But what I find interesting is that we're hardwired to be sharing that stuff. Like,
right.
Because we're literally for 2 million years of human history, it's only just a couple hundred years where like we were, especially men, were told that we're not supposed to do that. And that's a big part of the reason why, guys are struggling with this stuff, and why the suicide rates are so high in men, and why the depression rates are so high in men, and why there's so many people stuck in the exact situation you talked about, which is they're just surviving, and they don't have the luxury of digging into their feelings.
Right. But one of the things that I think is going to help us get men out of that mindset is being around other men.
Yeah.
So let's talk about men's group a little bit, and just some of the things that you've learned over the years of doing that, and being in a group of men. One of the things I found interesting, you were talking about how you didn't want to kind of dump all of your baggage onto the people closest to you in life. You wanted to kind of have a different group that was for that. Is that how you would describe it?
Yeah. We see a lot of men come into men's groups that are like, they've had a divorce or something like that, and then they look around and they realize they don't have any friends.
Mm-hmm.
They have acquaintances at work or colleagues. They have acquaintances in the sports teams, but nobody that they can talk to about their life, the things that are on their mind, everyday guy stuff.
Right.
And that was my experience. And I didn't want to share that stuff with the people around me because I was scared. Like you said, I was scared to burden my family. I didn't want to stress them out. Didn't want to be a burden to my friends or whatever, And so over time, I just invested in work and my relationships and stuff like that, and didn't invest in my friendships. And so, I got to a point where, I didn't have many people to talk to. And the research shows that that's pretty ubiquitous for men. It's pretty common. They did this great study where, I'd have to look at who it was. I apologize for not being able to cite it well, but they basically walked around 40 years ago and asked men in North America, "Hey, how many confidants do you have? Like, how many people can you talk to about your life?" And the average answer there was 4.5, somewhere between 4 and 5. So men felt that he had 4 to 5 different people he could talk to about his life that were not his romantic partner.
Mm-hmm.
Today, guess what that number is? They did a study a couple of years ago. Guess what that number is?
Less than 1.
Yes, correct. It's 0.5, something like 0.5. So that means that half the men in North America don't have a single person to talk to.
Yeah, I know what study you're talking about. I've referenced that quite a bit. Just
great.
Even it's not just for men, but it's just as a culture.
Yeah.
The number of confidence culture wide, men and women, has decreased to 1 point something or other, where it used to be above 5, and we're just not making time for community anymore. We're not committing ourselves to deeper levels of relationship with people who aren't outside of our nuclear family for some reason.
Yeah. Well, I think it's because society is promoting junk food values.
Okay.
Society and media is promoting consumerism, achievements, success, social media likes, partying in the nightclubs, having fancy cars and stuff, when in reality, all the research shows, all the science shows that like that stuff doesn't actually make humans happy. What makes humans happy is community and healthy relationships and good health and purpose and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But society's pushing people towards the opposite,
I like that term, junk food values. Yeah, I'll steal that from you. So
I stole it from somebody, so that's fine.
Yeah. No, that's true. I mean, but that's exactly what they are. I mean, just like junk food, when it makes you feel something right away when you eat it. And so you get addicted to it and eat more and more of it. Right.
Yeah.
And I guess they're even engineering those foods right now so that they produce more of that dopamine reaction in us. Right.
Yeah. But is it actually good for you?
Right.
Well, no, obviously not. It's the same thing with this stuff. So yeah, I think unfortunately people are not, for a couple of reasons. I think men don't know how to build friendships, and because friendships require vulnerability and intimacy. I think that they're scared to burden the people around them. I think that they're scared as being judged as weak or gay or whatever. And so they just don't talk to anybody. And so that's why we have mensgroup.com.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a safe place you can do it. And if you're worried about that perception, you can do it in privacy, right? You can do it from your own home. Yeah.
Yeah. It's nice because you can get local men's groups in your local town. At church, they're on great men's groups, community centers, maybe the local veterans club or something, there's like lots of opportunities to do them locally. But I've had the experience where then I run into guys in the grocery store from the men's group, and it's this weird, awkward thing of like, I'll be with somebody and I don't want the guy to know that I was talking about something really personal last week, and or that I'm even in a men's group at all. So the online thing works really well because it's quite a bit more confidential, and you're not going to run into those people.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that until you started talking about it, but that might be obviously it is, because you've got guys doing it, a great way to be kind of a stopgap and maybe even prime the pump for some deeper in-person relationships,
Yeah, which is what happens. These guys actually become friends and they learn how to communicate better. And then that not only creates friendships, but it also empowers them to make new ones in the future. Which I think is the number one thing that guys take away that they didn't expect to from a men's group in general, is like they get to observe how other guys are communicating about their lives. And then they take that and they're able to do that better with their partner. And they're able to do that better with their kids or their friends or whatever. Right.
Yeah. So we've got guys out there listening to the podcast. What would you say to some of them that are thinking, I just don't know if that's for me. I don't know if I'm the kind of guy that really needs a group like that. I'm good kind of managing it on my own.
I'd say good for you, man. like that's great. I mean, if that's true, that's great. I just ask the guy to be honest with himself about like how are his results, how are his relationships? Because for me personally, like I find like life is this never-ending journey of a bunch of stuff I have to work on, and weird conversations being had with people and like conflicts. And I love having a place to go and bounce that off of guys that I respect and see how they think about those situations. Because it allows me to get it off my chest. It takes the load off. I don't have to stress about it as much. They tell me exactly what to do a lot of the time. And then I don't have to, and then I can show up even stronger for the people around me, my romantic partner, I don't have kids, but hypothetically my kids, like I wouldn't have to bring that home because I've got this place, this outlet to, unload that on. So I honestly think a lot of people are kidding themselves when they feel like they say that they don't need something like this, because I think that what they're really saying is that it just feels foreign and kind of weird, and they're kind of like begrudging that they didn't have to do something like that. There's a lot of like weird feelings around this kind of thing, similar to therapy, but that everybody can benefit from community. But that being said, I'd also say that there's lots of different tools. There's therapy, there's coaching, there's faith-based groups, there's all kinds of things that. So I would say to him, whatever tool you find the most interesting, as long as you're continuing to investigate things and grow and getting into this stuff, like that's a win. It doesn't have to be a men's group.
That's a lot nicer than I was hoping you were going to say.
Like, man up. Well, I mean, my honest feelings are about it is if you're okay, I'll draw a bit more of a hard line. I think a lot of people are scared of these kinds of groups because they know they're going to talk about some stuff that's uncomfortable. And if you're shying away from your feelings that are inside of you, you're a coward.
There you go.
These things are inside of you anyway. You should probably just deal with them and get it over with. And just like you take your cardio mechanic when something's going on, right? You're not any less masculine because you take your cardio mechanic to fix a problem. Well, you have a problem with your relationships or your emotions or some challenge you're facing. It's like, this is a useful tool to help you through that. Quit being a coward and just face the music.
Yeah, maybe that's the tactic to use, is call guys cowards, or was it? What did Biff get mad about in Back to the Future? Was it when Marty called him chicken or something?
I don't remember. I'm sorry. I saw that movie. I saw the movie so long ago. I loved it, but I don't remember that line. Yeah,
I think Marty was calling him a chicken or something, and he
probably. Maybe I do have to draw a harder line around that, because like I do think a lot of guys say everything's fine when it's not. Even I do. Sometimes.
I do that. I mean, and it's. I don't know if it's sometimes for me it's a lack of vulnerability or willingness to be vulnerable. Yeah. Other times it's I don't know if the person asking that question really wants and has the time for the honest answer.
Yes, that's true.
Like if you really want to know how I'm doing, do you have like a half an hour to sit down over coffee and I can tell you how I'm doing okay, but there's a lot of things that I'm wrestling with or struggling through right now. And, so the honest answer is let's have a talk.
Let's have a talk. Yeah. And there's so much that needs to be in place for a guy to share that stuff because of that fear of being judged. It's like, you got to trust the person. You got to feel like the conversation's naturally leading there. It can't feel forced or rushed or, yeah, especially if guys don't get into that stuff usually.
Right.
Like even I feel resistance. If you and I sat down and you're like, how you doing?
Right.
There's still this feeling of like, I don't want to share what's actually when I'm actually feeling, like the eating issues I've been dealing with or the stress around work or the weird conversation I had with my partner last week or that we've been fighting in the surf. Or, I don't really, so,
right.
Yeah, I think it's got to happen in the right environment.
Yeah, I'm fortunate to have a group of guys that I meet with regularly, and we're all pastors, so we all kind of share similar experiences and frustrations and challenges and all that stuff. So over the last 3 or 4 years, we can get together and we can talk and we can open up and kind of console one another through challenges and encourage one another. And there's been a lot of hard stuff that our group has gone through in the last a couple of years. And I think it would have been, the last couple of years for everyone have been hard, but it would have been even harder without a group like that. And we when we couldn't meet in person, we met on Zoom. So I guess we have a little bit of experience doing groups like you're doing groups. But
fantastic.
I mean, I don't know, and I don't know what the answer is because I do think it's really important, but at the same time, for whatever reason, we don't want to make a commitment to it. So there must be you must have to agree to some kind of commitment level when you join one of these groups.
Actually, we kind of go the opposite route because we realize there's so many objections that are not money based and that are not like, it's more just like, I've never done this before. It seems kind of weird, partly because there's a big stigma around men's groups of like guys chanting in the woods or getting naked or doing, using First Nations language or whatever. It's like a lot of men's groups have unfortunately marketed themselves very poorly. And so we're trying to make it as approachable as possible, which is, hey man, come try it out. See what you think. If it's not for you, that's fine. We'll give you your money back. And what ends up happening is guys typically say the same thing, which is like, I felt skeptical. I begrudged having to be, I didn't even want to be here. But you know what? It's actually kind of cool hearing other guys talking about what they're going through that's similar to me. I found that useful and I'm happy I came here. So we actually just encourage guys to come try it out. And if they don't want, if it's not for them, that's fine. We don't really want to keep them around. We don't want to take their money.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you wait for them to leave, or if someone's kind of waning in their commitment, do you kind of strike up a conversation? And
no, we just, we've seen guys come back after 6 months, a year, even they'll be quiet for 3 months. Like a lot of men's groups try to like drive commitment, force commitment. And we do have like higher level stuff. We have like intimate men's teams we can put you into that are like the same 10 guys, or you'll meet every week and you'll really get to know each other. Things like that, where we do require a bit more commitment, but like, we just want to make something that works with guys' schedules and guys' lifestyles and where they're at. And 1 week they might be super stressed about something, and then the next 2 weeks they might not be, and then the next week it might pop up again. So we're trying to take a bit of a different approach and just make it really easy to use and flow in and flow out of as guys' schedules permit.
Right.
If that makes sense.
No, that's good. I've always been trying to drive guys to commitment. So maybe I need to try the light-handed approach a little bit and see how that works.
Well, I think the cool thing is that when you let guys try it out, I don't know. I'd be curious to you're talking about a different kind of person in a different kind of environment than me, but what I found is that the people that really value this kind of thing and see benefit will stick around regardless. Like we've had members from 2 years ago that are still in their groups, or even longer, and they could leave any time. It's just month to month. They pay their $29 a month or their $50 a month or whatever they're paying, and they're still showing up. So it does allow you to find the ones that actually want it, and the ones that don't drop out, which is good.
Yeah,
because otherwise you end up in this thing where it's like, oh, Rob's not here again. Oh, we'll have to have a conversation with Rob. I don't know. It's our members do that a little bit. If a guy doesn't show up who's been there for a while and he's important, they'll follow up with him. Like their group mates will do it, but we as an organization do not. It's like, hey man, whatever you need. You don't need this thing right now? Cool.
But
Happy trails.
Yeah, that's different when it's the guys in the group, because they're doing it out of concern and relationship for the person,
and love and respect, and also just wanting them to be there, missing them.
Right. Yeah. 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 That's good. Well, we're just about out of time. You have anything else you want to throw out there or talk about before we wrap up?
I would just encourage guys or anybody listening to continue to investigate the internal stuff, the emotional stuff that we were talking about earlier. Because if I had to identify one thing as a man that's made the biggest impact on me, it's digging into my inner life. And I don't know how you'd talk about it from a religious standpoint, David, but for me, it's just like getting in touch with the feelings that are there and building a relationship with that part of myself. Because if I've learned anything, it's that life is an inside job. Mm-hmm. The more I focus on this stuff, and fixing is like a negative word, but you know what I mean? Right. Building a better relationship with that stuff in myself, the less I find myself triggered in the world, the easier I breeze through life, the more success I seem to have externally. It's weird. It's very counterintuitive that I spent my whole life trying to pursue external things. And then when I actually put my focus internally, that's when the external things started to come my way.
Yeah.
So just reach out to any tools. Could be, one of David's church groups, could be one of my men's groups, could be a book, a podcast, some kind of kooky therapy that you never thought you'd try in a million years, but hey, it seems interesting. Just keep exploring and digging into this stuff, and it will pay dividends.
Yeah. I echo that. The inner man is a really important man in our lives, right?
The most important. That child, that little version of ourselves that's still in there, whether we like it or not. You can write me off as kooky for saying this, but like there's things you felt as a child, they're still hanging around in there. You have this little child in you. Yeah, that is
100%.
That will destroy your life if you ignore him.
Yeah.
Or if you befriend him, then you can feel light and you won't be acting out in these unreasonable ways and blowing out into anger and
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, some of the people we've worked with over the years who are addicts, most of the time the drive into addiction came out of something in their childhood.
Did for me.
And
100%. Yeah.
It's so important to, I mean, I guess not put the child to rest, but allow the child to grow up inside as well. I mean, we might be growing up on the outside, but we haven't really found any way. We haven't addressed the internal measurement of ourselves at all, and we're just staying in that position and allowing those same things to hit us in the same way.
Yeah, you're kind of stuck, right? Like honestly, in emotionally, I was stuck as like a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old. Like that little boy felt really sad about himself because he wasn't performing to his dad's expectations. And he was really sad about some of the results he was getting in sports and stuff like that. And like maybe socially as well, taking things a little bit too personally. And like, I carried that, and that defined my career, the partners, the romantic partners I was choosing, the friends I was hanging around with, the things I was doing, what I was posting on social media, and so just, I can't express enough how important it is to, when you're triggered emotionally, step away and sit with it and to start to rebuild a relationship with that part of yourself.
Right. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. Hopefully that wasn't too much of a ramble. That's the last point.
I think that's really good.
Good.
Yeah, we could keep talking, so we'll have to have another conversation down the road.
Yeah. I'd love to. Yeah. This has been great, David. And I love what you're doing. And anybody who's listening, you can just reach out via the contact form, men's group, or at mensgroup.com, and I'll respond, or hope to see you in one of our men's groups.
Yeah, mensgroup.com. We'll put a link in the show notes for this episode. Make sure you get there. Go check it out. No pressure to sign up, but just go check it out and watch a couple of the videos they have up there of some of the talks, and just kind of get an idea of what it is. And you might want to try it out for a little while, and it might be just a little moment of insane courage, right? What was that from? 20 seconds of insane courage from that We Bought a Zoo. Did you watch that movie?
That's right. We Bought a Zoo. Yeah, I remember that movie. Yeah. That's great.
Get just 20 seconds of enough courage to go and say, you know what, maybe there's something to what Sean was saying. And if I just work on this inner man just a little bit, it might have great, the fruit of that in our lives is always, when you see somebody start to work on the inner man in their life, it always has such a big effect on the rest of their life. They seem to thrive in ways that were previously impossible, and they just become such good people to be around in so many different ways. And like so if you want that for your life, get just enough courage to go check it out and try a group for a little while and see if it doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And hey, if a group's not for you, we have a lot of great useful articles on our website and YouTube videos and stuff around how to improve your relationship, how to communicate better, how to get over subtle addictions like porn addiction or whatever, how to stop being such a nice guy and set boundaries, all those kinds of things. We're just trying to help guys. So mensgroup.com.
That sounds great. Good. Mensgroup.com. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much, Sean. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you, David. This has been great.
Thank you for listening to the Man They Remember podcast. You can find us online at www.mantheyremember.com, facebook.com/mantheyremember, and instagram.com/mantheyremember. Thanks for leaving a review and your rating on Apple Podcasts. And most importantly, thanks for sharing this podcast with your friends.